"I built that house so my family would always feel safe," I murmured, gripping the steering wheel. "But tonight, it feels like the walls themselves are warning me." I was dozing in the recliner when the storm found its voice, rain like nails on glass, thunder rolling the walls I built with these hands. The landline rang, old, insistent, a bell from another life. Mrs. Thompson's whisper cracked through the static. "Mr. Donovan, please come quick. It's the garage. Mark's garage. Something terrible happened." My coat was on before fear caught up. Keys, door, night. Then the road, black and shining, swallowed my headlights, and one by one, every good memory I had of him. If you think the storm ended here, you're wrong. Subscribe and follow Henry's story as the darkness unfolds. The rain hadn't slowed by the time I reached the old county road. It came down in thick silver sheets, the kind that blurred the world into shadows and reflections. The wipers squeaked like old bones, barely keeping up. My headlights cut through the fog, flashing over the same landmarks I'd known for 40 years. The Miller barn, the dead oak, the sign that used to read, "Welcome to Maple Hollow." It all looked smaller now, lonelier. I'd driven this route 1,000 times back when Laura was little. We used to count the turns, 7 from home to the school, 12 to the hardware store, 15 to church on Sundays. She'd sit in the passenger seat with her mother's scarf tied around her hair, pretending it was a pilot's cap. God, she'd laugh at every bump. The memory hit me like a ghost in the back seat, soft, familiar, gone before I could turn to see it. The years do strange things to a man. They shrink your world until all that's left are the things you've built and the things you've lost. Laura was all I had left. After her mother died, I poured myself into raising her. Every nail I drove, every beam I lifted, every hour I stayed late at the shop, it was for her future. And when she met Mark Rivers, I told myself maybe life was giving her what it had taken from me. He was clean-cut, charming, said "sir" without sounding rehearsed. I remember the night he asked for my blessing to marry her, his hand steady, his voice full of that rehearsed humility people use when they've already decided what they want. I gave it gladly. I thought I saw decency in his eyes. But lately those eyes looked different. The last time I'd visited, Mark barely looked at me. He brushed me off with half smiles and polite silence, the kind that hides something sour. Laura tried to keep up appearances, but her laughter, it used to fill rooms, had turned into small, careful sounds, like she was afraid of waking something that slept inside him. I noticed things: empty bottles in the garage, late-night calls she'd hang up the moment I stepped in. I didn't ask. Maybe I didn't want to know. The rain hissed against the windshield. My hands tightened around the steering wheel as I replayed Mrs. Thompson's words. Something terrible happened. Her voice had trembled like a wire under strain. I didn't know what waited for me at that garage, but I felt it deep down. It wasn't an accident, and it wasn't random. When I finally pulled up to the house, my heart sank. Laura's place, the one I'd built myself before handing it over to her, looked like a ghost under the storm. The porch light flickered, the paint peeling from years of neglect. I parked by the curb and stepped out. The rain soaked me in seconds. Through the curtain of water I could see movement, flashlights bobbing around the yard. Neighbors, faces pale and wide-eyed. Something was wrong, deeply wrong. I ran toward the garage. Mrs. Thompson stood by the driveway, holding her umbrella like a shield. "Henry, oh, thank God you're here," she said, voice shaking. "I didn't know who else to call." "What happened?" I asked, breathless. She hesitated, eyes darting toward the garage door. "You just need to see for yourself." The metal door was half closed, the lock broken clean off. A beam of light flickered inside, somebody's flashlight. The smell hit me first: oil, rust, and something else, metallic and sharp. I pushed the door open. It creaked upward with a scream of hinges, and the light fell across the far wall. That's when I saw it. My old work overalls, the blue ones I wore back when I built this very home, were nailed to the wall. Heavy construction nails through the sleeves, stretched wide like some grim effigy. Above it, smeared in what looked like black paint mixed with something darker, the words glared back at me. Pay what you owe, or pay in blood. My breath caught. For a moment, I couldn't move. The sound of the rain outside faded into a dull hum. Every inch of me went cold. Someone behind me whispered, "Oh my God." But I barely heard them. All I could think was that someone had taken something sacred, my work, my history, and turned it into a warning. The storm's wind pushed through the open door, making the overalls sway slightly, like they were alive. My knees almost gave out. I built this house with those hands, with those tools. I built this garage, and now it stood as a message meant for me. Sirens wailed in the distance. Someone must have called the cops. Mrs. Thompson stepped closer, her voice breaking. "Henry, do you know who would do something like this?" I swallowed hard. "I've got a few ideas. Mark." His name didn't have to be said aloud. It was there, in every thud of my heart. He'd been desperate lately, nervous. I'd overheard Laura once crying into the phone saying, "We can't keep borrowing, Mark. Dad won't understand." I hadn't pressed. Maybe I should have. A younger officer arrived, trying to sound calm. "Sir, please step back. We'll take it from here." I nodded, stepping into the rain again. My hands trembled. I didn't feel like the builder anymore. I felt like one of those nails in the wall, driven into place by someone else's hand. That night, after the police cleared the scene, I sat in my truck for a long time, watching the lights fade one by one. The rain softened, leaving only the steady tap on the windshield. I whispered to myself, what debt could possibly be worth this? There was no answer, only the whisper of the storm and the taste of iron in the air. Somewhere out there in the darkness, someone wanted me to pay. And deep down, I knew it wasn't over. I didn't sleep that night. I sat by the kitchen window, watching the rain drag itself into dawn. The storm left behind a silence that felt heavier than the thunder ever did. Every creak of the house sounded like a whisper from the past, from her, from the days when laughter filled these walls instead of fear. I made coffee, the same way I had for 40 years, black, strong enough to scrape the back of your throat. The smell was familiar, grounding, but my hands still shook when I poured it. On the counter sat the old photo of Laura as a child, missing her front teeth, holding the little wooden bird I'd carved her for her 7th birthday. I used to tell her that bird would always find its way home, no matter how far it flew. Now, I wondered if I'd lied. By 9 a.m., there was a knock at the door. Laura. Her eyes were red, her hair damp, like she hadn't slept either. She tried to smile, but it crumbled halfway. "Dad," she whispered. "I'm so sorry about last night." I didn't know what to say. I wanted to hold her, tell her it wasn't her fault, but something inside me, some hard, splintered piece of truth, kept me still. "You and Mark okay?" I asked. She nodded too quickly. Yeah, we're fine. The police said it was probably teenagers. Stupid prank." I just stared at her. She couldn't meet my eyes. That told me everything I needed to know. "Teenagers don't break locks and nail messages into walls," I said quietly. She flinched, then exhaled. "Dad, please, I can't. Mark doesn't want me talking about it. He's already upset. He said it'll make things worse." That last line hit me like a hammer. Make things worse. There was something she wasn't saying. There always was. She'd inherited her mother's heart, soft, loyal, even when it bled. But she'd also inherited her mother's blindness to the people who hurt her. "Laura," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, "I built that house for you and your boy to be safe. If there's something you're not telling me, I need to know." Her eyes filled. She reached across the table, then pulled her hand back before touching mine. "I just need time, okay? Time, the one thing you never really have when the clock's already ticking toward disaster." That afternoon, I drove back to the old workshop. The police tape flapped in the wind like yellow ghosts. The garage was empty now. They'd taken the overalls, the nails, the message, but I could still see the shadow of it all in my mind. The smell of rust lingered. It clung to the air like guilt. I walked the space slowly, fingertips brushing the cold concrete walls. Every mark, every stain, every echo reminded me of a life spent building, not destroying. And yet someone had turned my own work into a weapon. My chest tightened. On the far shelf, I saw something the officers must have missed. A small, oil-stained rag. When I picked it up, something heavy clinked to the floor. A nail. Big, industrial, the kind used for framing. My initials were carved into the head. I'd done that decades ago, back when I first built the house. No one else could have known about that mark. Whoever nailed those overalls had been inside my personal storage, inside my memories. That realization hit like a cold slap. It meant this wasn't random. It was personal. That night I drove to the diner at the edge of town, the one Robert Hayes still frequented every morning. I hadn't seen him in a while. He'd retired a few years back, after 40 years on the force. Still wore the same leather jacket, same calm eyes that could read a man before he spoke. He looked up when I walked in. "Well, I'll be damned," he said. "Henry Donovan, still alive and kicking." "Barely," I muttered, sliding into the booth. "Got something I need your eyes on." I told him everything. The storm, the message, the overalls. He didn't interrupt, just stirred his coffee slowly, the spoon clicking like a metronome. When I finished, he leaned back and said, "Sounds like a warning, not a prank. You got anyone who might hold a grudge?" "1 or 2 people over 40 years of work," I said, "but nothing like this. Not anymore." He studied me for a moment. "You think Mark could be mixed up in something?" I didn't answer. Didn't need to. Robert sighed. "I'll make a few calls. Just be careful, Henry. When a man's past starts knocking, it's usually because it's already inside the house." That night back home, I sat in my chair again. The storm was gone, but the silence it left was louder than ever. I looked around at the walls I'd built, the ones that had once felt unshakable. Now they felt fragile, hollow. I thought about Laura's voice, the tremor when she said she couldn't talk. I thought about the nail in my pocket, heavy as truth, and for the first time in years, I was afraid of my own house. The next few days moved in strange rhythm, like a song that couldn't decide on its own tempo. Mornings were too quiet, nights too long. I spent hours fixing small things that didn't need fixing, tightening screws on the porch rail, sanding a piece of wood that would never become anything. It was easier to fight splinters than the thoughts clawing inside my head. Mark hadn't called once. Neither had Laura. The silence between us stretched thin, ready to tear. On Thursday, I finally drove over. The storm had left the streets scattered with branches, puddles reflecting the grey sky. When I pulled up to their house, I saw Mark in the driveway, hunched over his phone. His posture, slouched, guarded, told me more than any words could. He looked up as I got out, his mouth tightening into that half-smile I'd come to hate. "Henry," he said, voice falsely bright. "Didn't expect company. I figured we should talk," I said, "about the garage." He slipped his phone into his pocket. "Oh, that. I told Laura. Some kids, probably. How bored they get." "You keep saying that," I said, stepping closer. "But that lock was broken with a crowbar. And those nails, those were mine. Someone took them from my old shed." For a moment, his jaw flexed, the smile faltering. Then it returned, smoother this time. "You're seeing ghosts, old man. Maybe you should rest a bit." Something about the way he said "old man" made the air colder. It wasn't teasing. It was dismissal. I was already fading out of his world. "I'm not seeing ghosts," I said. "I'm seeing patterns." His eyes narrowed. "Patterns. People under pressure start to show cracks," I said, watching him closely. "Sometimes they do stupid things to hide the damage." He laughed, short and sharp. "You're a carpenter, Henry. Stick to wood and nails. Leave the psychology to people with degrees." Before I could respond, Laura stepped out onto the porch. "Dad, what's going on?" I looked at her. She seemed tired, thinner, her face pale. She tried to smile, but her eyes gave her away. Fear, the kind that doesn't leave bruises but carves deep all the same. "I just came to check in," I said, softening my tone. "Didn't mean to start anything." Mark's arm slid around her waist, possessive. "We're fine, right, honey?" Laura hesitated, then nodded. "We're fine." But she didn't sound fine. She sounded like a woman standing at the edge of a roof, pretending she wasn't afraid of falling. I didn't stay long. As I turned to leave, I caught a reflection in the front window, a shadow moving inside behind the curtain. Someone else? Or maybe just the echo of paranoia. Still, something about it lingered all the way home. That night, I called Robert. "You were right," I said. "Something's not clean here." He grunted on the other end. "What happened?" "Mark's nervous, too nervous, and Laura's covering for him." "I figured as much," Robert said. "Listen, I pulled some files. Your son-in-law's got debts, big ones. Atlantic Poker Club, underground scene. He's been in over his head for months." I closed my eyes. "How much?" "Enough to ruin him twice over. And Henry, some of the names he owes aren't the kind you negotiate with." A long silence stretched between us. I could hear the static hum of the line, like a slow drip of dread. "Can you prove it?" I asked. "I'm working on it, but you should keep your distance for now. If he's desperate, you're not safe." I hung up without answering. Keep my distance? From my daughter? From my grandson? That wasn't in me. Later that evening, Laura called. Her voice trembled. "Dad, please stop digging into Mark's business. He's under a lot of pressure right now." "I know he is," I said. "That's what worries me." "You don't understand," she whispered. "He's trying to fix things." "Fix things how?" But she didn't answer. The line went dead. I sat in the dark, the phone still in my hand, feeling the walls breathe around me. The same walls I once built to keep them safe were now holding in the secrets that could destroy us. At midnight, I walked out to my own garage. The rain had started again, tapping the roof like a warning. My tools hung neatly in their places, the air smelling faintly of sawdust and oil. I ran my hand over the workbench, tracing the grooves worn by decades of labor. My life story was etched into that wood, and somehow it had become part of this nightmare. A noise outside made me freeze. Footsteps, light but hurried, just beyond the door. I grabbed the old hammer from the bench, heart pounding. When I flung the door open, the yard was empty, just rain, darkness, and the soft rustle of leaves. But there, on the ground near the porch, lay a single poker chip. Red, embossed with the letters APC. I didn't need to look it up. I already knew what it stood for, the Atlantic Poker Club. The same name Robert had said. It wasn't just debt, it was blood debt. And now the trail led straight through my family's front door. The next morning I woke before sunrise, couldn't stand lying in bed while my head ran circles around the same questions. I made coffee, stared at the steam rising from the mug, and thought about that red poker chip. I'd kept it in the pocket of my jacket, as if holding proof would make the fear less real. It didn't. It only made it heavier. By mid-morning, I was sitting in Robert Hayes's kitchen. He'd aged but not softened. His eyes still had that cop's precision, always scanning, measuring, connecting dots most people never saw. He studied the chip through his glasses, rolling it between two fingers. "Atlantic Poker Club," he muttered. "Private tables, heavy hitters. You don't get in without an invitation, or a very bad habit." "He's in deep, isn't he?" I asked. Robert nodded slowly. "From what I've found, he owes around 70 grand, maybe more. The kind of number that makes men do stupid, permanent things." I felt my stomach twist. "He's got a wife, a son." Robert gave me a look that said he'd heard that line 100 times. "Doesn't stop the desperate ones. Sometimes that's what they gamble with." He leaned forward, lowering his voice. "Henry, there's something else. I pulled public records on a new insurance policy. You know who the beneficiary is?" I didn't answer. I didn't need to. My throat had already gone dry. "Your name's on it, Henry," he said quietly, "and the signature isn't yours." For a long moment, all I heard was the ticking of his wall clock. Then I stood up, slow, deliberate, like an old machine coming to life. "Where'd he file it?" "Downtown branch last week. He used old employment info, listed you as still running the carpentry business. Policies worth 200,000. I laughed, a short broken sound that didn't feel like mine. "So that's the game. He kills me, cashes out, pays off the sharks." Robert's jaw tightened. "You need to call the police." "And say what? That my son-in-law forged a signature and plans to murder me for an insurance payout? You know how that sounds." He exhaled through his nose. "You're right. Without proof, it's just noise. But if you play this smart, we can get proof." He outlined a plan. Simple, cautious, precise. He'd have a friend at the precinct start a quiet inquiry. No official file yet. In the meantime, he wanted me to act normal. Pretend I knew nothing. Let Mark think I was clueless. That was the hard part. Pretending. When I got home, the answering machine blinked. 3 messages. The first was spam. The second was Laura, her voice brittle but trying to stay composed. "Hey Dad, just checking on you. Mark's been stressed, but things are okay. Call me later, okay? Love you." The third message froze me. It was silence. Then a man's voice. Low, calm, not Mark's. "Old debts don't die easy, Mr. Donovan. Sometimes they come back wearing family faces." Click. I stood there, staring at the machine. My heart thudded slow and heavy. Whoever that was, they knew exactly who I was. And they wanted me to know they knew. That night, I sat in the dark, the voice replaying in my mind. Family faces. The words echoed like hammer strikes. I thought of Laura again. Her pale face, the way her hands trembled. What had she seen? What had she been made to ignore? By the time I drove to her house the next morning, I'd made up my mind. No more pretending. When I arrived, Mark's car was gone. Laura opened the door, her expression startled. "Dad, what? Where's Ethan?" I interrupted. "At school." "Good. We need to talk." She looked like she wanted to argue, but something in my tone stopped her. She led me inside. The house smelled faintly of burnt coffee and something sour, stale air, unwashed tension. I told her everything, the chip, the insurance, the phone call. She didn't speak, didn't even blink. When I finished, she sat down slowly, her eyes glassy. "I didn't know about the insurance," she whispered, "but the debt. I knew something was wrong. He's been meeting people late at night, lying about where he's going. I thought it was gambling. But lately," her voice cracked, "lately I've been scared to ask." I reached across the table and took her hand. "Laura, you need to take Ethan and stay with me for a while." She shook her head. "He'll come looking, and if he thinks I told you, let him come," I said. "He's already crossed the line." For the first time in years, I saw something shift in her eyes. Not fear, but resolve. The spark of someone remembering who she used to be. She nodded. "Tomorrow." Tomorrow. It was such a small word, but it carried the weight of everything we had left to lose. Tomorrow never came the way we planned. I woke up before dawn, packed a small bag with essentials. Flashlight, hammer, my old revolver from the years I kept it locked in a safe, just in case. I hadn't touched it since my wife passed. Funny how quickly you can fall back on instincts you swore you'd buried. The air was heavy, like the world was holding its breath. I waited for Laura's call, but it didn't come. By 7 a.m., I couldn't stand it anymore. I drove to her house. Her car was still in the driveway. The front door was open. I called her name once. Nothing. Then again louder. The house swallowed my voice whole. Inside, the place was chaos. A lamp had been knocked over, glass scattered across the carpet. One of Ethan's toys, a little blue truck, lay on its side near the couch. The coffee table had a dent, like someone had kicked it. There was no sign of them. "Laura!" I shouted again. My voice cracked on her name. Then I saw it, a note pinned to the wall with a screwdriver. My heart stopped when I read it. "He's fine. She's fine. Don't call anyone. We'll talk tonight. M." The handwriting was Mark's, but the pressure in the letters told me everything I needed to know. He wasn't in control. He was panicking. I grabbed my phone and called Robert. He answered on the second ring. "She's gone," I said. He didn't need details. "Stay put, I'll call it in." "No," I said sharply. "If he finds out I called the cops, he might—" Robert cut me off. "Henry, listen. If he's taken them, this isn't a family matter anymore, it's a crime. I'm not sitting here while some rookie fumbles through protocol," I snapped. "You said you had a friend who could track calls. Use him." A pause. Then a sigh. "Give me the number she usually calls from." 10 minutes later, he called back. "Pinged it near the old construction site on Route 12. Abandoned project from your company, right?" My stomach turned. "Yeah, we left it unfinished when the funding fell through." "Go there," he said, "but don't go inside until I arrive." I hung up without promising. The drive was short, but every mile stretched like a lifetime. When I reached the site, the place looked worse than I remembered. Half-built walls, rusted cranes, a landscape frozen mid-construction, my past staring back at me in skeleton form. Laura's car sat by the entrance. The driver's door was open, keys still in the ignition. The rain from last night had turned the dirt into mud, full of deep footprints leading toward one of the unfinished warehouses. I followed them. Inside it was cold and empty, the kind of silence that feels like it's watching you. My footsteps echoed off the concrete. I called out, "Laura?" A faint sound answered. Not her voice, but a muffled cry. "Dad!" she gasped, from somewhere deeper inside. I ran toward it. My flashlight cut through the dark, revealing half-finished walls, hanging cables, old equipment. In the corner, Laura sat on the floor, wrists tied with an extension cord. Her face was bruised, but she was breathing. Before I could reach her, I heard a voice behind me. "Stop right there, Henry." Mark. He stepped out of the shadows, a gun in his hand, my gun. He must have found the safe key in Laura's house. His face was pale, sweaty, his eyes wild with exhaustion and fear. "Mark," I said quietly, raising my hands, "you don't have to do this." He laughed, a bitter, broken sound. "Don't I? You think you can take everything from me? You think you can just rebuild your perfect little world without me?" "Nobody's taking anything," I said. "Just put the gun down and we can fix." His voice cracked. "You think money fixes this? Those people, those bastards, they want their payment. You know what they told me? They told me I could pay with my life or with yours." He waved the gun toward me, trembling. "You're worth more dead than I'm alive." Laura sobbed. "Mark, please, don't do this." He turned toward her. "You think I wanted this? You think I asked for this life?" His voice softened for a split second. "I just wanted to give you everything. I wanted to be enough." "Then be enough now," I said. "For your son, for her. Put it down." He looked at me, really looked, and for a moment I saw the man he used to be, the one who smiled on my porch and promised to take care of her. Then it was gone, replaced by something hollow. "You should have stayed out of it, old man," he said. I took a step forward. "And you should have learned to build instead of destroy." He flinched, like the words cut deeper than he expected. Then he raised the gun. That's when headlights flashed across the far wall. Robert's car. The distraction was enough. I lunged forward, grabbing Mark's wrist. The gun went off, the sound deafening. Sparks flew from a metal beam. We struggled, his strength fueled by panic, mine by something older, the raw will to protect what was left of my family. Robert's voice boomed from the doorway. "Drop it, Mark." Mark twisted, pulling away from me. The gun swung toward Robert, and I didn't think, I just reacted. I grabbed the nearest thing within reach, a broken 2x4. I swung. The board hit his arm hard enough to knock the gun loose. It clattered to the floor. Robert moved fast, kicking it away, then tackling Mark to the ground. The fight went out of him instantly. Sobs, curses, the sound of everything collapsing inside a man who finally ran out of excuses. I went to Laura, cut her loose. She threw her arms around me, shaking. "Dad," she cried, "I thought you were—" "I'm here," I said, holding her close. "I'm not going anywhere." Outside, the first light of morning bled through the grey clouds. The storm had finally passed. But for me, it felt like something else had broken too. The illusion that love could fix what rot had already claimed. They took Mark away in handcuffs. He didn't look back. Maybe he couldn't. When the last police car drove off, Robert turned to me. "You all right?" I looked down at my hands, shaking, bloodied, still holding splinters from that old piece of wood. "No," I said, "but I will be." After the sirens faded and the police lights vanished down the road, the world felt unbearably quiet again. The kind of silence that comes after a storm, when you realize the wreckage isn't just around you, it's inside you. Laura and Ethan stayed with me that night. She fell asleep on the couch, clutching her son like she was afraid someone would take him if she let go. I sat across from them in the armchair, listening to the old house breathe. The boards creaked, the wind sighed through the eaves, and every sound carried memory. I'd built this place with my hands, board by board, for a family that no longer existed the way it once did. Around 2 a.m., I finally went out to the porch. The air smelled of rain and damp soil. My hands were raw, my knuckles swollen. I could still feel the weight of the 2x4 in them, the same way I used to feel a hammer, a tool of creation. Night, it had been something else. A weapon. That thought sat heavy in me. For years I told myself I was a builder. But maybe every builder has to destroy something first. When dawn came, Laura was awake, staring out the window with hollow eyes. "He's gone, isn't he?" she asked quietly. I nodded. For a long time. She didn't cry. She'd run out of tears somewhere between love and fear. I wished I could take some of the weight from her shoulders, but the truth was, I was barely holding mine. The next few days blurred. Statements, paperwork, police visits, hospital checkups. Everyone wanted to know the same things, how it started, what I knew, what I did. But no one asked what it felt like to watch your daughter's world crumble in front of you. Maybe they didn't want the answer. Robert came by every morning, bringing coffee and that dry humor of his that made it easier to breathe. "You did what you had to," he said once. "Don't let guilt take credit for bravery." I tried to believe him. But every night when I closed my eyes, I saw Mark's face, the flicker of fear and regret when I swung the board. I'd built a life around fairness, patience, decency, and in one moment I'd undone it all to keep my daughter alive. It wasn't heroism, it was survival. And survival never feels clean. The neighbors stopped by with casseroles, sympathy, polite words, the kind of pity that comes wrapped in good intentions. I thanked them, smiled where I could, but inside I just wanted to be left alone. Days turned into weeks. The house felt strange again, like it was shrinking. Laura decided to stay with her sister for a while, take Ethan somewhere quieter. I helped them pack. When they drove off, the emptiness that followed was sharper than I expected. I stood in the driveway long after the car disappeared, hands deep in my jacket pockets, trying to remember what peace used to feel like. At night, the quiet grew unbearable. I started talking to myself, sometimes to my wife, as if she could hear. "I kept my promise," I'd whisper to her photo. "I protected our girl. But I don't know what's left of me now." Robert noticed. One evening, he showed up uninvited with a six-pack and that familiar half-smile. "Thought you might be getting tired of your own company." We sat on the porch, the wood still damp from afternoon rain. He cracked open 2 beers, handed me one. Neither of us said much for a while. Finally, he spoke. "I've seen a lot of people break after less than what you went through." "Maybe I did break," I said. "Just learned to keep working with the broken parts." He nodded, raising his bottle slightly. "Then you're already ahead of most." I looked out over the yard. The grass had grown tall, the fence needed repainting, little things easy to fix, if you still believed fixing was worth the trouble. "Robert," I said after a while, "you ever feel like you're still fighting even after the war's over?" He smiled faintly. "All the time. The trick is remembering you survived." He left before midnight. The house felt quiet again, but not hostile anymore, just tired, like me. Before bed I stood in the workshop, the air thick with sawdust and memory. The hammer, the level, the old nails, all lined up like soldiers waiting for orders. I picked up a block of pine and ran my thumb along its surface. The smell brought me back decades, to when Laura was little, to laughter and light. I found the old carving knife, dulled from age, and started shaping the wood. Slowly, carefully, the form began to emerge. A bird, small, simple, imperfect, like the one I made for her all those years ago. By sunrise it sat finished on the bench. I placed it by the window, where the light would hit it first every morning. It didn't erase the past. It didn't heal the cracks. But for the first time in a long while, it reminded me who I was before the darkness came. A builder. The days that followed were quieter, but not peaceful. Quiet doesn't always mean calm. It just means the noise moved inside. I spent my mornings walking through town, trying to fill the hours that used to belong to someone else. The same streets I'd driven Laura to school on, the same diner where her mother and I used to sit by the window. People would stop and offer the kind of sympathy that sounds like comfort, but tastes like dust. "You did what you had to," they'd say. "You're a good man, Henry." But good didn't feel like the right word anymore. Just tired, just old. Robert kept checking in. He'd call every few days, sometimes drop off groceries or the newspaper. "You've been on the front page enough for one lifetime," he'd joke. But even he could see I wasn't laughing much these days. One afternoon, he came over with something in his hand, a manila envelope. He set it on the table without saying a word. "What's that?" I asked. "Closure," he said simply, "or as close as you're going to get." Inside were photos, surveillance stills. Mark meeting with two men in leather jackets behind the casino lot. In one of them, Mark's face looked different, not scared anymore, determined. He was holding a duffel bag. Robert pointed at it. "That's the cash he stole from Laura's joint account the week before he went after you." I stared at the photo for a long time. "And the men?" "Both dead," Robert said quietly. "They were found 2 nights ago in an alley downtown. Whoever they worked for didn't like that they failed." He looked at me then, his expression unreadable. "That means no one's coming after you anymore. It's over." The word sat there, hollow. How do you end something that's already burned through everything? Still, some part of me eased, the small part that had been waiting for a knock on the door that never came. That night I drove to the lake, the same one Laura used to fish at when she was a kid. The water was still, the air thick with that faint metallic scent that always comes before rain. I sat on the pier, the old boards groaning beneath me, and let my legs hang over the water. The reflections staring back looked like someone else, a man hollowed out by duty and loss, but still breathing, still here. A truck pulled up behind me, headlights dimming. Robert got out, carrying 2 paper cups. "You always were a lousy hermit," he said, handing me one. "Coffee?" "Whiskey," he corrected. We sat there in silence for a long time, passing the bottle between us. Finally, I said, "I don't know what to do with myself now." Robert chuckled softly. "You rebuild. It's what you do best." "Rebuild what, though?" I asked. "Everything I built turned to ash." He took a slow sip, then looked out over the lake. "Then start small. Build something that lasts longer than you." I thought of Ethan, his laugh, the way he'd once asked if I could make him a birdhouse that smells like Grandpa's shop. Maybe that was it. Maybe that's where I start again. The next morning, I went back to the workshop. The sunlight through the blinds felt warmer than it had in months. I swept the floor, wiped the benches, sorted through old lumber. The smell of pine filled the air, sharp, alive, forgiving, the rhythm of the tools, the scrape of sandpaper, the hum of the saw. They stitched something back together inside me. By noon, I'd built the frame of a small birdhouse. Nothing fancy, just honest work, the kind that asks nothing but your attention. I hung it on the old maple tree outside near the porch. When I stepped back, I saw it for what it really was. Not a house for birds, but a promise. To keep building, no matter how many storms came. Later that week, Laura called. Her voice was steadier now, lighter. "Dad," she said, "Ethan wanted to talk to you." I heard his little voice on the line, full of excitement. "Grandpa, I caught a butterfly. I'm going to bring it to you." I laughed for the first time in months. "You better bring it quick before it flies away." After the call, I sat on the porch, letting the quiet wrap around me. For once, it didn't feel heavy. It felt earned. When Robert stopped by that evening, I showed him the birdhouse. He smiled, looked sturdy. "It'll hold," I said. "Maybe that's enough." He nodded. "It's always enough." We stood there as the sun dipped behind the trees, the sky bleeding orange and gold. For the first time since the storm, I felt something close to peace, not the kind you get from forgetting, the kind that comes from surviving. And in that silence, I realized something simple but true. You can't rebuild what's lost, but you can honor it, nail by nail, day by day, until the noise in your chest starts sounding like life again. The following week brought a strange calm, the kind that almost feels like an apology from the universe. The sun lingered longer over the yard, the maple tree hummed with the sound of insects, and the wind carried the smell of fresh grass instead of rain. I told myself I was fine, that this quiet was what peace looked like. But peace, I've learned, is rarely quiet. It's just waiting for the next echo. Robert called one morning. "You might want to sit down," he said. "I got word from my guy at the station." I gripped the phone tighter. "What now?" "They're reopening parts of Mark's case. There's chatter that someone else might have been pulling strings. The guy who fronted the loan, maybe. Name's Carter Lowell. You remember that name?" I didn't, but it didn't matter. "What's that got to do with me?" "Maybe nothing," Robert said. "Or maybe they think Mark left something behind. Papers, proof, money. Either way, you might get a visit." I stared at the half-finished coffee on the counter, the surface trembling slightly from the hum of the refrigerator. "You saying I'm still not done with this?" "I'm saying be careful," he replied. "Loose ends have a way of tightening when you least expect it." After he hung up, the house felt smaller again. I looked around, the photos, the tools, the birdhouse outside swinging gently in the wind, and I felt the old instinct stir, the one that said, "Prepare." That afternoon I walked through every room like I was seeing them for the first time. I checked windows, locks, doors, replaced the batteries in the flashlight, filled a drawer with spare shells for the revolver I hoped I'd never have to touch again. By evening, the tension in my chest had settled into something steady, almost mechanical. I wasn't afraid, not anymore, just alert. When night fell, I couldn't sleep. I sat on the porch with a cup of coffee, listening to the woods. Crickets, the far-off hum of a truck on the highway, nothing unusual, until I heard it. A single car slowing near the house, then idling, headlights off. My pulse quickened, the engine cut. I stood, moving quietly back inside. Through the curtain, I saw the faint outline of a figure stepping out of the car, tall, broad, moving slow, deliberate. Not a neighbor, not someone lost. I reached for the revolver in the drawer. The floorboards creaked as I made my way toward the door. The porch light was off, but the moonlight was enough to see the shape moving closer. Whoever it was stopped halfway up the drive, staring at the house. Then a voice. "Mr. Donovan." Not angry. Too calm. I didn't answer. He took another step. "My name's Carter Lowell. I think we need to talk." The name hit like a nail driven through wood. Robert's warning echoed in my head. I kept the gun low behind the curtain. "What do you want?" I called out. Nothing that belongs to you, he said. Just something Mark owed me. I laughed once, dry and sharp. You'll have to get in line. I'm not here for trouble, he said. I'm here for closure. He reached into his jacket slowly. Too slowly. I cocked the hammer. Careful, I said. You move wrong, and closure's all you're going to get. He froze, hands half raised. I've got a letter, he said, from your daughter. That stopped me cold. I lowered the gun an inch. Prove it. He held out an envelope, white, clean, folded once. She mailed it to my office by mistake. I thought it was business. Turns out it's personal. Leave it on the porch, I said, then get back in your car. He obeyed, setting it down slow. Then he straightened, met my eyes through the shadows. You're not the only one who lost something, Mr. Donovan. Then he turned, walked back to his car and drove away without another word. The taillights disappeared down the road, leaving only the hum of crickets and the beating in my chest. I waited a full minute before stepping outside. The envelope was damp with dew. I brought it inside, sat at the table and opened it. Inside was Laura's handwriting, shaky but clear. Dad, if anything happens, please know I forgave him long before the world did. And I forgive you too. I know you did what you had to do, but don't let this house become your prison. You built it to protect life, not to mourn it. Keep building, Dad. For me, for Ethan. I sat there until the sun came up, the letter trembling in my hands. Outside, the birdhouse swayed gently, catching the first light. And for the first time, I realized this wasn't the end of something. It was the beginning of the reckoning. I didn't tell Robert about the letter right away. I needed to sit with it, to feel its weight before sharing it with anyone. Laura's words weren't just forgiveness, they were instruction, a reminder that survival isn't enough. You have to live after surviving, or else the darkness still wins. But the mention of Carter Lowell kept me awake for nights. The man hadn't shown up again, but something in his tone, the calm way he'd spoken, told me he wasn't finished. Men like that never come for closure, they come for what's owed. 3 days later, I got the confirmation. It was early evening. The light outside was dying fast, a golden strip fading into grey. I was in the workshop, sanding the edges of a new birdhouse for Ethan. I heard the crunch of tires on gravel before I saw the car. Same dark sedan, same hum of an engine, tuned too smooth to be local. I didn't move. I just waited. The engine cut and the door opened. One set of footsteps, then another. 2 men. I set the sandpaper down, wiped my hands on a rag, and reached under the bench for the revolver. The metal felt cold and steady in my palm, like an old truth I didn't want to speak out loud. Mr. Donovan, a voice called from outside. Not Carter's this time. Younger, rougher. I stayed silent. You home? We just want to talk. The back door creaked open before I could reach it. One of them stepped in, tall, mid-30s, shaved head, jacket too nice for a hired thug. His partner followed, broader, meaner. Their eyes swept the room like they were already measuring what they'd have to break. I raised the gun. You got one chance to turn around and leave. The bald one smiled. We're not here for you, old man. We're here for what Mark left behind. There's nothing here for you, I said. He shrugged. That's not what Carter thinks. At that name, something inside me snapped into focus. You tell Carter, if he wants something, he can ask himself. I don't deal with messengers. The second man stepped forward. We can do this easy, or... The hammer clicked. They both froze. The air between us was thick enough to taste. Oil, sweat, the faint tang of sawdust and fear. The taller one's hand twitched toward his belt, and before I could think, before I could weigh the morality of it, the shot went off. The sound shattered the quiet like a bomb. The man screamed, clutching his arm, blood blooming through his sleeve. The other lunged, knocking the gun from my hand. We crashed into the workbench, tools scattering. I felt the corner of a vise smash into my ribs. Pain exploded white-hot. He grabbed my collar, snarling, "You think this ends with you?" I drove my knee into his stomach, hard. He doubled over just long enough for me to grab the hammer from the bench. One swing. Not to kill, just to end it. The hammer cracked against his jaw. He collapsed, groaning. The first one was already stumbling toward the door, blood dripping down his arm. He looked back once, hatred twisting his face. "Carter's gonna burn your world down, old man." Then he was gone. I stood there, chest heaving, the smell of gunpowder hanging in the air. My hands shook, the hammer slipped from my fingers, hitting the floor with a dull thud. The sound echoed longer than it should have. Minutes later I called Robert. He showed up fast, eyes scanning the chaos. "Jesus, Henry." "They broke in," I said. My voice sounded like it belonged to someone else. He checked the pulse of the man on the floor. Still alive, barely conscious. "You need an ambulance." I shook my head. "No hospitals, not yet. They'll just start asking questions that end with me in a cell." Robert gave me a look that wasn't quite judgment, wasn't quite sympathy. "This won't end quietly now." "It never does," I said. "But it's not ending here." By the time the police came, Robert had already arranged the story. Self-defense, intruders, justified force. The wounded man was taken away in cuffs and silence. But before they loaded him into the ambulance, he said something that froze me to the bone. "He's coming himself now." That night, I didn't sleep. I sat on the porch with the revolver resting on the armrest beside me, the house lights off, the birdhouse swaying gently in the wind. Every sound, the creak of the porch, the rustle of leaves, felt like a countdown. At 2 a.m., a car approached, slow, deliberate. Headlights off until it was right in front of the house. Then they flared, blinding white. I stood, gun in hand. Carter Lowell stepped out, wearing a grey suit that didn't belong in a town like this. He looked too calm as he closed the car door and stared at me across the yard. "Mr. Donovan," he said, "you've caused quite a bit of noise. I'm not the one who came looking for it." He smiled faintly. "You have something that doesn't belong to you." "And what's that?" "Peace," he said, "and I'm here to take it back." He started walking forward, slow and steady. The gun felt heavy in my hand. "One more step," I warned, "and this ends your way, not mine." He stopped halfway up the path. "You don't scare me, Henry. Men like you always think the world still owes them something. You don't understand. It's debt that runs the world now." "I've paid enough debts for 10 lifetimes, I said, "not this one." For a second, neither of us moved. The world held still, the air thick with the smell of pine and storm and something older, like fate waiting to see who blinked first. Then, from behind Carter, headlights swept over the road. Another car. Robert's. He stepped out, gun drawn. "Drop it, Carter," he barked. Carter turned slightly, smirking. "You brought company. That's cute." Robert stepped closer. "It's over." "No," Carter said, pulling his own gun. "It's balance." He fired first. The shot cracked through the night, tearing the silence open again. I squeezed the trigger, almost at the same time. 2 sounds became one, then nothing but the echo rolling across the trees. When the smoke cleared, Carter Lowell was on the ground. Still, his gun beside him. Robert exhaled slowly, eyes on me. "You okay?" I looked down at the revolver, my hand trembling, the moonlight glinting off the barrel. "No," I said quietly, "but it's done." And for the first time in a long time, I almost believed it. Morning came slow, as if the sun itself hesitated to rise over what the night had done. I sat on the porch steps, the revolver wrapped in a towel beside me. The air smelled of gunpowder and pine sap, the ground still damp from the dew. A crow perched on the fence, silent, watching. Everything felt too still, like the world was deciding whether to move forward or stay frozen in that moment forever. Robert stood by his car, talking to the officers who arrived just before dawn. His voice carried the calm authority of a man who'd seen too much already. He handled the details, the statements, the things that would keep me from ending up in a courtroom. I didn't listen to much of it. My ears were still ringing from the shot. My hands still remembered the weight of the gun, the kick of the recoil, the finality of it. Carter Lowell's body was taken away around 7. I watched as they zipped him into the black bag and loaded him into the coroner's van. For a man who had tried to play God with other people's lives, he looked small in the end, ordinary. Maybe we all do. When the last police car left, Robert came back to the porch. He looked tired, older somehow. He handed me a cup of coffee, the steam curling into the cool morning air. "You're clear," he said. "No charges. They ruled it self-defense." I nodded, staring at the horizon. The sky was bleeding orange and pink, colors too beautiful for the kind of morning it was. "You saved my life," I said. Robert sipped his coffee. "You saved it first. I just finished the job." We sat there for a long while, saying nothing. The silence wasn't heavy this time. It was just there, familiar, earned. Finally, he spoke. "What are you going to do now?" I looked out at the yard, at the birdhouse swaying gently in the wind. "Build," I said simply. "Not for them, not for me. Just because I still can." He smiled faintly. "That's as good a reason as any." Laura and Ethan came back a few weeks later. The house looked brighter the moment they stepped inside. Ethan ran to me, arms outstretched, shouting, "Grandpa!" as if the word itself could heal everything that had broken. Laura hugged me next. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. The warmth in her embrace said enough, that she was safe, that we had survived something impossible together. And in that moment, I realized something I hadn't felt in months. Relief. That night, after dinner, Ethan tugged at my sleeve. "Can we make another bird, Grandpa? One for Mommy this time?" I smiled. "Kiddo, we can make a whole flock." We spent the next day in the workshop. The smell of sawdust filled the air, sunlight spilling across the bench. Ethan held the sandpaper awkwardly, his tongue poking out as he worked. Laura watched from the doorway, arms crossed, smiling in a way that reminded me of her mother. "Careful with your fingers," I said, guiding Ethan's hands. "You don't rush good work." He nodded solemnly, like I'd just told him a secret. "Like building a house." "Exactly," I said. "Just smaller, but the rules are the same. Every piece matters." When we finished, Ethan ran outside to hang the wooden bird next to the old one. It swayed in the breeze, side by side, old and new, father and son, past and future. As the sun dipped behind the trees, Laura came up beside me. "You think it's really over?" she asked. I looked at the birdhouses, their shadows stretching long across the yard. "Maybe not," I said. "But it's quiet now. That's enough." She nodded, resting her head on my shoulder. For the first time in a long while, I felt the air move easy through my lungs. Later that evening, after they went to bed, I sat alone in the workshop again. The walls hummed with silence, but it wasn't empty anymore. It was peaceful. The kind of peace you don't find. You build, one day at a time. I ran my hand across the workbench, over the old scars and stains. Every mark told a story. Every splinter was proof that creation always costs something. I picked up the carving knife, set a new piece of wood on the bench, and whispered to the dark, "All right, let's begin again." Months later, the house stands quiet again. But now it breathes. Every morning, 2 wooden birds greet the dawn. If this story reached you, remember, we all owe something, but dignity is the only debt worth paying back.